Hey teachers! Hey teachers, it's time for our Sunday Retro and Reflect. I'm Dr. Haley Blackburn here at Teacher's Pet, and I am a full-time assistant teaching professor with a 4-4 load, so I definitely need to take every Sunday to ponder what went well in that past week of the semester and really make sure I know what's going on as I manage my time, my class, my projects, plus research service mentorship. You know, all the things that we have to do in a semester. So if you have a planner or whatever type of planner, bullet journal, dated calendar, digital calendar you like to use to manage your time, I invite you to just join me as I kind of fill out mine, talk through my week, in reflecting and thinking about and planning ahead for all the things we need to do in our term, semester, and teaching cycle. Now, the first thing that I want to do every week is what I call, just our retrospective. And I primarily teach technical writing, kind of communication, type courses. And so a big thing that I always have my students do on a project is a project completion report or a retrospective. And in these retrospective reports, I have them first think about their project assessment. So how well they actually executed on the goals, the requirements of that project. And so I'm going to invite you to kind of do that with me, but instead of a project retrospective, just think about what did we do, in the past week? What did you set out to do? What were the goals? What needed to get done? How well did it actually go? And then the second thing that we want to do in this retrospective is think about our creative process. And for my students, that's where I have them actually write out, what were the different decisions that they made, from project management to problem solving to just, actually figuring out how to complete the project. And then they kind of reflect on and justify those decisions. So again, for us, what did you choose to do this week? Did you try something new? Did you take a risk? Did you follow kind of the same old that you love? And how did it turn out? Do you want to make any adjustments? And then the final piece of our weekly retrospective, and for my students and their project reports, is to reflect on kind of lessons learned. This is where they tap back into and reference things like the learning outcomes from the project. And I think for us, as we reflect on our week, it's going to be more of what do we want to change? What do we want to carry forward? What is something that we, kind of learned in our teaching practice? So let's do kind of our first weekly retrospective. If you want to write it down in your actual planner or notes, thinking about making a space maybe for it in a weekly layout, do that. Otherwise, if you just want to write it down in your notes or kind of think to yourself, love that too. I am going to be using a whiteboard here just because I want to kind of quickly reflect. And then in the future, as you'll see in my weekly layouts, I might actually make a space for it. So let's just reflect. And again, I'll put it up on the screen with a little bit of a music break and a timer, and just follow along with reflecting on, what'd you do this past week? How'd it go? What were some of the decisions that you made and their outcomes? And what's something that you learned or that you want to move forward with? All right, so that first part that we're working on and that I'm writing down now is going to be part one, the assessment. So just what did you set out to do in this past week, and how did it go? Okay, and if you're not quite ready, pause me. I'll be here waiting. But basically, my kind of look back this past week for me was spring break. I know we're on a little bit of a late schedule because it is week 10 for me actually. But I was on spring break, so I didn't need to, go to class or anything. But my students had turned in their Unit 2 projects right before we left for break. So they turned those in on the 22nd. So one of my kind of big goals this week was to grade 50% of them, because I do like to and accomplish getting projects graded in like a 10-day window, 10 working days, so basically 2 weeks. So I wanted to make sure that I had at least 50% of them, still graded over break, so that way when we come back from break at the regular schedule, things aren't quite so hectic. And I did, in fact, accomplish that. Super excited. So how I broke it down, I just kind of giving myself a little quota every day, so that way I could still enjoy some break and get some of the things that I wanted to done. And then I also found that going to my campus office is kind of where I like to grade. That's sort of my grading space instead of doing it at home. So I just dedicated a few hours, which also led me to, get some steps in and be outside. The weather's kind of really nice where I'm at this past week. So that was kind of number one, and I did accomplish that. Now, the second thing I wanted to do over break, I am working on an article with a co-author. It has already been accepted to a conference, but now, we're expanding sort of that draft, right, to get it ready for some deeper, publication kind of stuff. So I really needed to focus on drafting that article, and I mostly did it. Like, I did dedicate a few days to what I call storm writing, which is basically like, let me just get all the ideas and just, get a lot of words on the page. That way we can go back and edit. I had definitely wanted to and hoped that I would get a little bit more progress done in that and have it in a little bit stronger space. I meet with my co-author on Wednesday coming up this week. I think, it's a flexible situation. But I did halfway, right, get that done. And I did get a couple of pages written, so that was good. The third thing that I wanted to do was publish another chapter of my OER textbook that I'm writing for my class, which I did not do. There's plenty of reading materials out there, so it's not a huge deal. It was kind of a push, an aspirational wish. I do have like 8 chapters done. That's what they've been using all semester so far. But we kind of caught up, right, to where I had written, and every semester I'm just trying to add a few more chapters. So eventually I'll have a full kind of custom course pack, basically. But when I really sat down, I was like, there's honestly too many other things that are more time pressing, that really are taking up more of my time in my contract. So that I did actually make the decision to just say, I'll just use the reading materials from last semester. They're great. They're fine. And this summer I'll continue working on my textbook chapter instead. So, I didn't get that done, but I do feel a sense of relief, just kind of committing and making that decision to go ahead and just use the textbook the reading materials and textbooks I had used last semester. And the last thing I wanted to just really work on this teacher's pet community and start really figuring out what type of content do I want to capture, and start posting and publishing, and really thinking about what would be, fun and helpful for me, and then, hopefully fun and helpful for you, and try to build up that community. So definitely got that checked off as I actually set up kind of a journal and thought, hey, I'm making these journals anyway. Maybe I should start recording, and seeing, who else, what other teachers out there, like to do their kind of weekly planning over the weekends and kind of look ahead. So out of my 4 things that I really wanted to accomplish, I got like 2.5 of them done, which honestly feels pretty good to me. All right, the second thing that we're going to do now, and I want you to stop and think about, and you write down for yourself, was just that creative process. What are some of the decisions that you made that you liked? What are some of those decisions that you wouldn't do again? How is that going? Let's stop and ponder for a minute. All right, so some of these decisions, and you might have already thought about it in the assessment portion, but some of the creative decisions or just like choices that I made that were helpful. Like I am fortunate that I can actually walk to my campus. We live quite close to it. So that's really nice, right? I get like a couple miles in just walking to work and then walking around campus. Since it is spring and the weather is warming up, I definitely want to continue doing that as the weather allows throughout the end of the semester. Also using my grading queue as we, start wrapping into the final unit that I'll be starting. Definitely just want to make sure I stay up and ahead. Sometimes it's very easy to say, I don't want to grade anything today. But for me, especially since I like doing them in that 10-day turnaround, just making sure that I get through however many kind of tallies that I make that day. Then makes future me much happier for sure. So I want to keep up with that practice. And since I did get through the first half, I actually am feeling really good. I'm like looking at my kind of tally board right now. And really I only have to do about 10 projects a day. Because even though I do have kind of a 4-4 load this semester, I actually only have 3 classes because I have a kind of a different side project and course buyout for some stuff. But I still have like 65 students. And so, yeah, just making sure I get through basically, just a little bit under sort of 10 a day will put me in a really good place to actually finish before my personal posting deadline next Friday, because I do have a department meeting. So I want to try to get them all done by next Thursday. Yay. I also found that just like writing in the early morning, so as soon as I get up from about like 7 to 9 a.m. is a better window for me to get my article writing and that kind of thinking time done. So definitely want to focus on that next week, see how it goes. And then I also made the decision to choose some good days for rest, which I don't regret. I'm glad that I did that over spring break. As I then prepare for the end of the semester and trying to stay really positive and high energy as the students are obviously getting a little burnt out and run down in this final push. Because of course my final unit is a little bit of a long, tough one, since now they have to build on everything that we've learned in the first 10 weeks to do this really kind of big final long technical report. So those are some of my decisions. Let me know in the comments, what are some of the accomplishments you did this week and some of those like creative decisions or just like little tips and tricks that help you as a teacher, educator, professor, instructor, stay focused and get your goals done. All right, now this last piece is just, any lessons that you learned, things that you want to keep doing, looking ahead. And I would say, just write down like 2 things that really stood out as bright spots, so that went just extremely well, and maybe 2 things that you might consider like tweaking, changing, or doing a little bit differently. All right, and so I actually am going to start with my growth areas, because then I realized my bright spots directly kind of support and help move my growth areas forward. So 2 things that I was kind of like, ooh, not doing great at. I definitely have procrastinated on that journal article writing. It's been productive procrastination, right? Which that's definitely my toxic trait that I'm working on. I really productively procrastinate when things feel a little bit overwhelming, a little bit scary, just a little bit like, oh, this is important. And so I got a ton of stuff done this week. I got it all done because I was using it to put off kind of that journal writing process. So that's something that I really need to work on next week. Our deadline isn't until the end of April, but of course I need to get, a really solid draft done this week, next week, so that way we can edit it over the final 2 weeks of April, with plenty of cushion for that submission deadline. So that was one thing. That was kind of a really big. The other thing was I actually wasn't using my planner very much this week, and that's kind of been a trend actually over the last month or two. And part of it is because, it's just I realize it's not exactly what I need anymore. I've kind of like evolved a little bit past it and just it's the end of this planner. I've been using it for a year. And so kind of the fun and the novelty has worn off, and now kind of the gaps that I want to do differently in it are really showing. So those are my two growth areas. So then the bright spots, and also how I will address those, is setting up my own journal, my own planner. And so that's what we'll pop into for our planning portion of the video, so you can kind of see. So that's definitely, like, as I was setting that up and just thinking about what I wanted, I do feel excited for how it might work just a little bit better for me and refocus me, re-energize me to think more intentionally about my to-do list and really make sure I'm prioritizing what needs to get done, address some of that productive procrastination as well. And then having that new journal will, just like have me setting up and planning ahead. So that is my kind of weekly retro. Again, let me know how your week went. Give tips, advice, support each other in the comments. I would really love to read and see what you're working on. But now it is time to jump into the planning portion of our weekly kind of reset check-in. So if you have your planner, let's go ahead and start setting up our next week. And if you want to watch kind of my full just video of me just setting up the layouts and honestly making a lot of mistakes, you can go watch that now. Otherwise, we're just going to fill in my week ahead as you fill in your week ahead. Let's do it. I am just creating lines where I will eventually put my to-do list. But I like to break my to-do list actually into AM, which is kind of, morning till about noonish, PM, which for me goes till about like 4-ish, and then what I consider night evening. And I like to time block out my tasks more than just a complete straight list of things to accomplish in the day. I also like to write down a playlist of the week, which I have a link to this in the video description. It's called Back to the Garage, and it's basically just a collection of, real millennial, sort of think high school garage band type music. And I play it in my classes. I do teach college, so I have a little bit more freedom in what music I can play. But they are, safe for work, high school nostalgia, rock band type sounds. And I really like doing things like grading to it, so you can check that out. Then I want to make sure I have a space for what unit and module we're working on. While I do have multiple sections and like 60 plus students this semester, it's all of the same class, so I only have one course prep. So just having that note, we're working on Intro to Research and Data, and it's week 11 of my semester. Now I left this space to do a quest. The side quest comes from the Heroes Journal folks, and they have these little, just quest decks of stuff, which I kind of like to, just give me one, a little bit more out of the box goal. So this one is about, tell someone in your life that you love them, even if they already know. So I'm just going to take that and, write it in. I have gotten rid of things like, what's your intention, or like a goal, or a lot of really reflective stuff that I found in most pre-made planners, just because I didn't tend to use it that much. But having one quest box is kind of a nice workflow for me. And just so now jumping down, I had put the weekly reset. It was a sticker that I printed out printed it on sticker paper. Since it was a list of things that I know I'm going to do every single week, I could jump right down to this box where I realized, I don't need a space for Sunday. Because Sunday I really just focus on my weekly reset. And this place was going to be more useful for me to write down kind of the top big kind of quest, big things that I need to do this week. And this is my first time setting up a planner, a bullet journal for myself in a weekly spread, and I just completely forgot to add an area for that. So I I am correcting one of the many mistakes I made when setting up this journal. And next week I will remember and make sure to have some space for that. But I am going ahead and just basically finding some stickers that are going to fit, so that way I can write down, what I kind of just the most important goals for me to accomplish this week, essentially. And so the top 4 things that I really need to make sure to do this week is to post all the grades from Unit 2 by Friday, if not earlier. Then I also need to work on some stuff for my fellowship with the Office of the Provost. I need to continue drafting that article on with my co-author. 4th is actually submitting a grant application. So definitely 4 big kind of things that I wanted to make sure to write down. The last thing that I go through and do as I look ahead is just any of those hard blocks, looking at my calendar, and just writing those elements down, so that way, I know, and I actually use them to take up an entire space in my to-do list. So if I have class, for example, that's my class schedule, I have it use a to-do list slot, so that way then I don't overextend myself and write in tasks during a time that I'm busy. So I definitely found that to be really helpful for me. I treat each one of those as kind of a big block. So in the morning, really my main thing that I'll be doing is just getting ready for class and going to class. And then the very last thing, I decided this looked a little blank, so I'm giving myself, kind of like a quote. Some days maybe it'll be a song lyric, but this time I said, "Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose," just as a reminder that I am in the back stretch of the semester, even though I'm feeling a little, just burned out and tired. So I just need to stay really focused and get the final few weeks of this semester done. Thanks, teachers. I hope you have a great week, good vibes, that your planner is all set up and you know exactly what you need to do and accomplish in the next week. You have maybe some action items and plans from our retrospective reflecting on last week. And so, wishing you all the best. Can't wait to see you again. And join me back here next Sunday for another weekly retro, reset, and check-in. Vibes. Have a good class.